Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight The Podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of fantasyforesite.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Wednesday, August 26th. We've got our guy Steve at FF_encyclopedia back with us. We've got the preview of the quarterbacks and running backs of the AFC South. And once again, Fantasy Foresight, the podcast, is live. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Oh, Ben, you know I'm doing good, man. We are in the midst of the height of fantasy football draft season. You know, we're getting closer and closer to the start, and I'm amped. I'm ready to go, man. We've got a fun episode tonight. I get to talk about my guy, Gardner Minshew. Let's go. Steve, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I feel the same way. I was really pumped. I'm like, forget everyone else in this podcast. We're talking about Gardner Minshew.
That's right.
So Ben just shaking his head.
No, that dude's a gift that keeps on giving. I was just thinking about his little Bud Light infomercial deal.
Right.
And just talking about his ADP and everything, man.
Yeah, for us aging 80s kids, it was fantastic. But yeah, this is going to be a fun one tonight, guys. And as always, thanks for having me on. And, Basement Steve's here ready to go.
Very nice. Before we dive in, if this is your first time listening, just know that we are speaking in terms of single QB, full PPR redraft by default. All of our ADP data comes from fantasyfootballcalculator.com according to 12-team full PPR settings, and all of our fantasy finishes as well as our fantasy points per game calculations are all based on full PPR, limited to weeks 1 through 16 according to fantasypros.com. And with that out of the way, let's get right into it. And don't forget, if you like to consume this information in reading format instead of listening format, definitely go to fantasyforesight.com. Check out the Foresight Encyclopedia tab and get a look at all of Steve's great deep dive blog studies out there. And it's great work. Check it out for sure. And right off the bat, we are going to start off with the quarterbacks in the AFC South and go in order of their ADP. And the first quarterback off the board is not until Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson comes off at the 608 spot as QB6 behind Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray and in front of Drew Brees and Matt Ryan. He has the 27th ranked QB strength of schedule and the 19th ranked O-line. Already not off to a very good start there. But his aggregate projection is QB4, and Total Foresight agrees and likes him as QB4 as well. So you already see a little bit of value compared to that QB6 price tag. However, in fantasy points per game last season, he was QB2, did not miss a start. And, he was 67% accuracy through the ball almost 500 times for 3,800 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And then he also brings that rushing upside, 82 rushes, 413 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He was QB2 overall, 5th in consistency, 10th in consistency weeks 10 to 16, 9th in foresight consistency, 5th in QB1 percentage, 11th in touchdowns per attempt, 8th in completions, 11th in completion percentage, 13th in yards per attempt, 5th in pass touchdowns, and it doesn't stop there. 4th in QB rush attempts, 4th in QB rush yards, and 2nd in QB rush touchdowns. At Next Gen Stats, you can see that he had the 12th best passer rating, and he was 11th in completion percentage above expectation. At playerprofiler.com, it gets even better. 4th in deep ball attempts, 5th in money throws, 8th in completed air yards, 4th in pressure completion percentage, 8th in deep ball completion percentage, 8th in true completion percentage, 4th in red zone carries, 5th in production premium, 5th in fantasy points per drop back. It all comes down to one question for Deshaun. How will he look without D-Hop to lean on? He gets Brandon Cooks and David Johnson to help fill the void, and I believe in Deshaun the player, no doubt. The questions about him are also accounted for in his price tag at the 608. So when considering their relative costs of the guys being drafted around him, I only prefer Matt Ryan over him this season, and I'm taking him over everybody else.
Yeah, man, Deshaun Watson, one heck of a football player, and it no different when you look at his red zone numbers, guys. Last season, He only had 59 attempts in the red zone, which tied for 18th in the NFL. So, not necessarily high up there in the league. However, threw for 18 touchdown passes, tying for 6th. So you have to love that kind of efficiency with what he did with the opportunity. Obviously, big-time player, comes up in big-time moments in the toughest part of the field. And then he also had, Ben alluded to it, those red zone rushing attempts. He had 14 of those, 6 touchdowns. So when you think about the fact dude throws for 18 TDs, runs for 6 more, it's 24 touchdowns he accounted for in the red zone last season, which is outstanding. And the more I looked at those numbers, and we talked about DeAndre Hopkins as a Cardinal and how little he was utilized in the red zone, I started thinking about it more like Darren Fells was our second best red zone pass catcher. 12 targets, had 7 touchdowns. And I think that speaks to how little Watson had around him, not only all season, but especially down there in the money part of the field, where defenses will take Hopkins away from him, and he still finds a way to be that efficient. And, I walked away looking at those stats and just felt very impressed by Deshaun Watson. Not that it took that for me to be impressed by him by any means. So, and in some ways, guys, if Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb can stay healthy-ish, he might overall have at least a better set of weapons than he had last season. We'll wait and see on that. But, yeah, pretty excited about Watson this year, more so now than I was, probably even a week ago.
I love to hear that, Steve, because, Deshaun Watson was one of those guys who, over the past couple seasons, always had very poor offensive line play. We always looked at it and were like, how in the world is this guy going to have enough time to throw the ball? And then to see his throwing statistics that Ben went over, how good he was in deep ball throws, deep ball completion percentage, fourth and deep ball attempts. It's not a surprise when you see the one, let's see, where was a stat where he was fourth in pressure completion percentage. Not a surprise whatsoever, because the guy's always under pressure. He's always having to be on the move. So you take out his safety blanket in DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm with you. I have some concern over, where's he going to go with the ball? Who's going to be that trusted receiver? Can Cook stay healthy for the duration of a season? Is he going to rely more on passing out of the backfield to DJ? I don't know. There are too many question marks there for me, though. Although, Steve, you do if I'm looking at it and there's a tiebreaker, I do love the red zone statistics. I do like the fact that he didn't rely on DeAndre Hopkins in those situations, so you still have the ability to bank on that incredible touchdown rate that he had, both in per throw and overall number of touchdowns. So I do love that, but I'm with you, Ben. Out of the group of guys he's going around, I'd rather wait a few spots and take Matt Ryan rather than really any of the guys going immediately in front of him between Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, or Drew Brees.
But beyond that, man, I think it's kind of a hot take to say that we would take him over Dak at his price point, Kyler at his price point, this season. I think everybody's a little bit too far down on Deshaun Watson, thinking that he relied on DeAndre Hopkins a little bit more than he did. And if you think about a guy like Carson Wentz, he can be fantasy relevant without a predominant wide receiver. If Carson Wentz can do it, I have every bit of faith, and so can Deshaun.
One, it's ironic that Kyler and Deshaun are going back-to-back now that Kyler has Nook this season. And yet, if you're looking at it, to me, they're pretty close in my mind, all things with all the variables going into it, because Kyler's never done it for an entire season before. I don't know what he's going to be. I've seen Deshaun Watson with a poor offensive line, with weapons dropping around him. Nobody can stay healthy with, Lamar Miller as a running back and some of the talent he's had around him and what he's had to do with it, and he's still been a top 6 quarterback in this league in fantasy. So I know what he can do when you really want to count him out because he's got so much stacked against him. I don't know if that's the case with Kyler Murray. I just haven't seen it, so that's where I'm at with it. But all right, enough of that. Let's get to the hero of the show, my kindred spirit, Gardner Minshew, the next quarterback going off the board from the AFC South. He is being drafted way down the list now at quarterback 20 overall, going behind rookie Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and in front of Jimmy Garoppolo and Ryan Tannehill. Shame on everyone. How dare you disrespect my Jorts brother? Right now, the Jags have the 17th ranked strength of schedule for the quarterback position and the 26th ranked offensive line. Yeah, that's not a great equation right there. I'll give you that. But his aggregate projection is currently QB 14. In total, Foresight likes him as QB 19. Last season, in his first season, he came in and was able to finish as QB 21 in points per game. Very in line with his current price tag, I must admit. He did feature in 13 games and finished with a completion percentage at 60%, threw for just a shade under 3,000 yards in those 13 games, and also threw 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He did have 62 carries for 337 yards, but unfortunately did cough up the ball 7 times. Now, he was QB 23 overall. He was 21st in consistency, 26th in consistency from weeks 10 to 16. Admittedly not great. 28th in Foresight consistency, 27th in QB1 percentage, which means 26 quarterbacks in the NFL finished as a QB1, a top 12 in the position more often than Gardner did last weekend. He was also 28th last season.
He had that many finishes last weekend alone.
It's the same amount, yeah. He was, 27, no, I already got that, 28th in touchdowns per attempt, 10th best touchdown to interception ratio at least, 6th in quarterback rushing attempts, 5th in quarterback rushing yards. According to Next Gen Stats, he also had the 10th most time to throw, which is pretty surprising. And also, according to PlayerProfiler.com, he was 11th in red zone carries, 5th in deep ball completion percentage, 6th in play action completion percentage, and 3rd in passes dropped. So not entirely his fault. I like it. They've shipped out almost all of their defensive talent. So they'll be throwing the ball and playing from behind a ton, I would imagine. And when you look at him having the 6th most QB rush attempts and the 10th best touchdown to interception ratio, that very likely will equate to significant value compared to his QB 20 price tag, especially as a streamer and definitely in 2 quarterback leagues.
Yeah, guys. Now, he wasn't as efficient as Deshaun Watson, but Gardner Minshew was actually really solid in the red zone last season.
Yeah, he was.
So, of course, you didn't need me to tell you that, but I'll still say it anyways because we like to hear it. So he was only 20th in the NFL when it came to red zone attempts, but still tied for 9th overall with 16 touchdowns. Only threw 1 interception in the red zone, too, which, when I look at that, that's pretty impressive for a 6th-round rookie quarterback who literally probably got next to 0 quality reps throughout training camp and preseason and all that stuff leading up to when Nick Foles went down with an injury in week 1. So I just definitely impressed with what Gardner did last season, and now obviously this offseason he has a chance to be the guy, get all of those first team reps, and then like you alluded to, Jay, this team projects to be one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Just based off of pure volume alone. Whether he gets it in garbage time or any time throughout the game, they're going to throw the ball so much. And he has decent weapons when you look at DJ Chark, when you look at D.D. Westbrook, Chris Conley, Chris Thompson, Leonard Fournette. Like
there's even reports today that him and Tyler Eifert are forming a really good chemistry.
Yeah, and I can't think of the kid's name right off the top of my head. This second-round guy that they –
Chenault?
Yeah, Chenault. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Benny. Yep. So, he definitely has pieces around him. And then it can't be – we can't say it enough that he ran for 344 yards last season, but he didn't score a single touchdown. Typically, hey, Watson threw – what did he run for, like 418 we just went over, something along those lines, had 7 rushing touchdowns. Normally with a quarterback, Minshew should have had 3 to 5 rushing touchdowns based off that yardage. So you could tell listening to me, I like him. I have a feeling he's going to flirt with like low-end QB1 numbers overall in the season based off of volume and the opportunity he gets. QB20 – I love it.
I believe I'm the only one of the three of us to actually have current shares of Gardner Minshew. So I will be the resident expert about Mr. Minshew on this podcast.
Nice.
And, like you stole what I thought was going to be my sneaky point to round out Gardner Minshew, Steve, in that, sixth in quarterback rush attempts last year. Jay, you mentioned that you were surprised that he had the 10th most time to throw. A lot of that was by his own creation. He would create his time to throw. He would create yardage on his own on the ground. And like Steve said, if he is once again sixth in quarterback rushing attempts and fifth in quarterback rush yards, there's going to be some touchdowns that follow. And also, like you said, he's going to have all the starting reps this offseason. There's no question that he's the guy. He's got a year of experience under his belt. And I think that city has really embraced him. I think that team's really embraced him. Everybody loves Gardner Minshew, right?
Yeah.
So I think the kid's got talent. 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Like, this was a rookie that didn't have a high draft equity,
and he was thrust onto the scene really with
exactly
very
no
little
preparation invested in him whatsoever, and he did what he did. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to have him as my QB2 in the Scott Fish Bowl. I think he's going to make a lot of noise this year, just like you said, from a volume standpoint alone, along with that rushing upside. And speaking of Scott Fish Bowl, now we're going to talk about my QB1 in Scott Fish Bowl, which is Tennessee Titans quarterback Ryan Tannehill going behind Gardner Minshew and Jimmy Garoppolo as QB 22 at the 1402 in front of Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. Disrespect, man. He does have the 24th ranked strength of schedule of the quarterback position, middle of the road 15th ranked offensive line. Thanks for Conklin. And the aggregate projection is QB 17 for Ryan Tannehill. Total Foresight, again, I don't get it. QB 21. Show the man some love. He was QB 10 in fantasy points per game last year. And it wasn't, he had 9 starts, almost 71% off of 266 pass attempts, over 2,500 yards, 9.6 yards per attempt. I know regression is coming, but still 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on top of 38 rush attempts, 165 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. He was only QB 21 overall because of the limited starts, but he was second in consistency and inconsistency from weeks 10 to 16. No short sample size. He was third in foresight consistency, third in QB1 percentage. That means there were only 2 quarterbacks in football last year that finished as a top 12 QB1 more often than Ryan Tannehill. He had the 12th best touchdown interception ratio. He was second in touchdown per attempt. He was 4th in completion percentage, 1st in yards per attempt, and 16th in touchdowns in just 11 games. At Next Gen Stats, he was 1st in passer rating, 5th in most time to throw, and 1st in completion percentage above expectation. All right, hang on a second. Getting all excited about Ryan Tannehill here. They list I don't know what he did at playerprofiler.com, but they list Ryan Tannehill's best comparable as Jamie Lannister. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if they're just big Game of Thrones fans. They think he looks alike. I don't know.
That's
but
hilarious.
That's exactly. It's hilarious. I had to share. So at playerprofiler.com, besides that hilarity, he is 1st in true passer rating, 6th in true completion percentage, 1st in play action completion percentage, 6th in red zone completion percentage, 6th in pressured completion percentage, 4th in clean pocket completion percentage, 1st in production premium. We've talked about what that stat means and how it puts all quarterbacks in the NFL in similar situations and see who does the best in those average type situations. He's number 1. 1st in adjusted yards per attempt, 4th in accuracy rating, 2nd in fantasy points per drop back. All right, let me take you back. In 5 of 9 starts, he was QB 6 or better. In 7 of 9 starts, he was QB 12 or better. And remember, it's QB 22 we're talking about right now in price tag. So I just can't understand why he's being totally disregarded at that point as QB 22. He was number 1 in yards per attempt, coupled with being number 3 in pass accuracy at better than 70%. And it's not like he's some low attempt guy either. He averaged 28 pass attempts per start through week 16. No one in this tier of quarterbacks has shown more fantasy relevance than Ryan Tannehill, and I'd be fine rolling with him in a 1 QB format.
All right. I'm going to start with the good.
Okay.
That's going to be his red zone numbers. So, kind of. So, guys, he only had 37 red zone pass attempts last season. Obviously, he wasn't the starter the whole season. But Tennessee as a team only had 50. Lowest number in the entire NFL. So, but anyways, let's backtrack. 37 attempts. He threw for 14 touchdowns. Now, while that number in and of itself might not be impressive, guys, 38% of his red zone attempts went for touchdowns. Let me explain to you how insanely high that number is. Tom Brady led the NFL in red zone attempts last season with 91. If he was throwing 38% of his pass attempts for touchdowns, he would have thrown for 35 touchdowns in the red zone, would Ryan Tannehill have, which is how many Mahomes threw in 2018 when he threw for 50 on the year. So, in one way, that is sensational. I mean, we're talking like historically high efficiency in the red zone. On the flip side, we know that's not repeatable, right? Now, to what degree that's going to regress, we don't know. So then I also kind of then look at, well, the Tennessee Titans only threw the ball as a team 448 times last year. Only one team threw it less, the Ravens, 440 times. So when it comes to Tannehill, I agree. He's being very disrespected with his current ADP. Like, I can't get behind wanting to start him necessarily, but he should be someone who's rostered by more teams than not. He shouldn't be going this late because I don't think his regression is going to be that high. And then it just comes down to calling your shot. Like, do you think that the Tennessee Titans will be a very good team again that can get away with only throwing the ball 448 times again? And if that's the case with his regression, you probably want to stay away. But if you think there's going to be an increase in volume, then you could definitely get sneaky value out of Ryan Tannehill. Me personally, I'm kind of in between. Like, I'm more of the wait and see, but you could certainly call your shot on that. And, it's just really as simple as that to me.
Well, he's going 2 spots behind the guy who we just talked about in Gardner Minshew, and we went through all of Gardner Minshew's stats, and there's really not a ton, honestly, to get excited about from last season. Just where he ranked in various statistics, a lot of it were in the 20s, but listen, the guy's got an RV, a heck of an attitude, and we love the guy and want to root for him. So, he has that going for him, but what Ryan Tannehill has is Mike Vrabel and A.J. Brown, and those are 2 big things, and DH for that matter. I mean, those are major assets on the offensive side, and you see Mike Vrabel, from a coaching aspect, do really a bang-up job. I mean, I don't know, maybe outside of Bill Belichick, who has done more with less than Mike Vrabel has the last few seasons with Tennessee. So I trust that he's going to put his guys in the best position to win. We like to think every coach can do that, but they don't. I know Mike Vrabel does. So, even though Ryan Tannehill, look, if you would have extrapolated out his attempts from last season, he would have thrown for about 475 times. And while, that's not the highest number, 500 would be better, maybe even over 5. Tom Brady was over 500 pass attempts last season. You like that. But with a completion percentage of 70% and really a great touchdown interception ratio, I can stomach a little fewer on the attempt side if he's going to be more efficient with the football. And with the guys around him, I can see him doing that. So, like you guys kind of alluded to, he's not the biggest, flashiest name. He's not the most attractive pick, but he's probably the smartest pick at his value by far. I mean, this guy is easily a back-end QB1 this season. Even if he has some regression over what he did last season, we compare the numbers. A lot of Gardner Minshew's statistics were in the 20s, which is exactly what you would expect from a rookie quarterback who was thrust in the position he was. Ryan Tannehill's, all of his numbers are top 10. All of them, across the board, top 10. Yep. And it's not like it's not like it was the preseason or a few games before he went down. It was half the season and the latter half. So, I mean,
yeah.
It's crazy.
And what do we always say? We always come back to the price tag.
Yeah.
This guy is currently categorized as a streamer, and I'm telling you, you could grab him and end up riding him the entire season if he does anything close to what he did last year on an efficiency level, because his volume is definitely going to go up. So, you know, I mean, at this, if you punt on quarterback entirely and you are just going to play the streaming game, I don't know off the top of my head who they've got week 1.
On the road at Denver. So probably
on the road at Denver. So
one.
yeah, not the best matchup in the world, but like not something that's super scary either. I think Jimmy Garoppolo has a more attractive at home Arizona streamable type of matchup. But you know, he's somebody that if you're going to play the streamer game throughout the year, you might find wanting to start him more often than not. And when you consider that a lot of quarterbacks fail to live up to a QB1 level even 50% of the time, you know, it makes the guy and what he did last year pretty interesting.
Absolutely. All right. So the next quarterback and final quarterback that we're going to cover tonight is also an interesting one, just from a what side of the coin do you sit on? And that is Phillip Rivers, who is currently being drafted as QB 25, going behind Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock, and he's the second to last quarterback being drafted. So only Kirk Cousins is being drafted behind him right now. Now, the Colts, his new team, have the 5th ranked quarterback strength of schedule, and they have the number 1 ranked offensive line according to Pro Football Focus. You love seeing both of those numbers. Right now, his aggregate projection, though, is QB 24. Total Foresight likes him a little bit better at QB 18. Let's review his fantasy points per game. Last season, he was QB 23 in fantasy points per game. He did not miss a start. He finished in with 545 pass attempts and a 66% completion percentage for over 4,300 yards. Now, a little bit of the bad. He had 21 touchdowns and 18 interceptions. So, obviously not going to rank high on that touchdown to interception ratio. However, he was QB 16 overall. He was 26th in consistency, 24th in consistency weeks 10 to 16. Still not great. 27th in foresight consistency, 36th in touchdown to interception ratio. Ouch. 31st in touchdowns per attempt. Also not good. And 26th in QB1 percentage. However, he was 6th in completions, 7th in attempts, 16th in completion percentage, 3rd in passing yards, 15th in passing touchdowns, but he did tie for the second most interceptions. Some notable next-gen stats: he had the 5th least time to throw. That will certainly change now with the league's best offensive line. Jacoby Brissett had the 2nd most time to throw last season for comparison. He was also 6th in deep ball attempts, 5th in completed air yards, 5th in play action completion percentage, 10th in true completion percentage, 7th in passes dropped, but 2nd in interceptable passes. Rivers is super intriguing this year, as I had alluded to. On the one hand, he turned the ball over almost as much as anyone last season, but on the other hand, he has familiarity with head coach Frank Reich. He has an outstanding strength of schedule, the best offensive line with several nice weapons. I may not draft him, but he is someone I'm keeping a close eye on in week 1.
Yeah, so we're not going to go over Jacoby Brissett's red zone numbers necessarily, just because, I mean, come on, come on, guys. It's not applicable in this situation. We're apples to oranges as far as quarterbacks go. But I will say this, you know, the Indianapolis Colts, they did run the ball 46.4% of their offensive snaps, which does come in 5th in the NFL. They ran the ball, period, 471 times, which was 5th in the NFL. So I, too, am intrigued by Rivers and his situation. You know, he's going to have a lot of time to throw the ball. And I think that was a big part of his issue last season, was he just didn't have time. That's why Austin Eckler got peppered with so many targets. So it's going to be an interesting situation where I think, and I don't know, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Ben. I look at Rivers' situation next year in Indianapolis, and I think that he might be a lot better for them in like real football and for the Colts than he might be when it comes to fantasy, just because I don't know how he's going to get that typical Phillip Rivers Chargers volume in passing that we're used to seeing. Because I don't think the team, you look at, they went out and drafted Jonathan Taylor. So you just kind of think like with that line, they're going to run the ball, but they just want a quarterback who can push the ball downfield a little bit and be a little bit more of like a game winner leader than Jacoby Brissett was.
Hey, fifth in play action completion percentage last season.
Yeah, fifth. Yeah, I cut you off there. Fifth in play action completion percentage last year. Absolutely. Steve and I are on very much the same page tonight. I do think that Phillip Rivers is going to be a much better real life football player this year than he will be a fantasy football player this year. But I do think it's also very notable to make the comparison that Phillip Rivers was playing with very little time to throw last year, and Jacoby Brissett was given all the time in the world to throw last year, second most in the league. Now, I do remember seeing, I believe it was like fourth or fifth in run plays per game were the Indianapolis Colts last year, according to playerprofiler.com. And, you know, so like Steve said, there's not an innate desire to throw the ball a million times a game. They have a pretty solid defense and invested in their defense this offseason. So they could be a little bit more limited in volume wise because of that improved defense as well. But, you know, I'm keeping a close eye on him. You know, Phillip Rivers is one of those guys. He's at the end of his career. He doesn't have anything to lose. He's talked about being more judicious with the football. You know, there's a whole new energy around that Colts team. He's got a lot of weapons. T.Y. Hilton's kind of been MIA since Andrew Luck's been gone. There's a lot of stats of comparing T.Y. Hilton with and without Andrew Luck. And one thing we know about Phillip Rivers is he's got an arm and he can push that ball downfield just like Andrew Luck did. So all of a sudden you talk about T.Y. Hilton being back, Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell, you know, you've got Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines, you know, Jack Doyle. You got some weapons over there and a good defense. You know, it could be a good thing if they get in a situation where it's a shootout. Yeah, throw him in as a streamer all day. But yeah, he's probably best as a streamer, but he's an interesting one. There's all the smokes there to be some fire, so he is one to keep an eye on for sure.
All the signs are there, but you're still just like, do I have to? Oh, it makes
He's also
sense.
QB25 for a reason.
My
so,
brain
you know.
tells me I should. My heart really says, God, do I want to? Yeah.
And that's the beauty about those guys. They're free, and you can cut them if it doesn't work out, and you don't even have to invest a roster spot at all if you don't have to. But that does it for the quarterbacks in this division. We do have a very interesting set of running backs, starting off with a very infamous running back on this podcast, Tennessee Titans running back Derrick Henry. Oh, you're going to be surprised about this one, Jay. Currently going as the RB7 at the 108 behind Dalvin Cook, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, in front of Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon. The Titans running backs have the 11th ranked strength of schedule at the position and a middle-of-the-road 15th ranked offensive line. Now, DH was RB7 in fantasy points per game last year. Did miss that championship week for you last year, but finished the season with 271 attempts, 1,329 yards, almost 5 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns, and on just 18 receptions had 206 receiving yards and 2 more touchdowns. He was RB7 overall, 5th in consistency, and 5th in consistency weeks 10 to 16, 4th in foresight consistency, 3rd in top 6 percentage, 4th in RB1 percentage, 4th in RB2 percentage, 5th in rush attempts, 3rd in rush yards, 6th in runs greater than 20 yards, and 3rd in rushing touchdowns. And at Next Gen Stats, you can see that he is the 3rd most efficient north-south runner in the NFL and has the 5th highest percentage facing 8-man fronts. I mean, he faces more defenders than anybody else and still does what he does. It's pretty impressive. 8th in true yards per carry at playerprofiler.com. 4th in dominator rating, 1st in yards created, 9th in yards created per touch. I think it's important to have both of those stats because he has a high number of carries. And you might think, oh yeah, well, he's got a lot of volume. Of course he's 1st in yards created. If you do it on a per touch basis, he was still 9th in that metric. He was 2nd in breakaway runs, 7th in evaded tackles. But he did take the 2nd most big hits with 4. You don't like seeing that. But, I really like what the Titans organization has done as a whole this offseason. They recognized the good chemistry that they had and the unexpected success, and they kept the band together. DH got paid 4 years, $50 million, and Tennessee brought Ryan Tannehill back as well. So if that team can stay in games or lead games like they did last year, then you could absolutely get solid performances from DH compared to an RB7 price tag. However, he has had 518 carries over the last 2 years, and that wear and tear concerns me a little bit, as evidenced towards the end of the season last year. That combined with the fact that he just got paid concerns me just a little bit. I mean, unless his pass volume goes up, he has to continue to be an absolute rushing touchdown machine to ensure you don't bust on that 1st round price tag. You think back to the infamous arguments that we've had about DH on this podcast last year, and that was all relative to an RB18 price tag, okay? Now you are being asked to pay his ceiling price tag at RB7. So it's not unreasonable considering what he's done. But I am off DH at that price point this season. In PPR formats, I prefer guys with a bit more versatility as it pertains to their game script. He's got no passing upside, so if the game script goes that way, he's completely erased at RB18 all day long. At RB7, little too rich for me.
So, guys, last season, we'll just go over his red zone numbers here really quick. For a team that, like I said, only threw the ball 50 times in the red zone, Derrick Henry had 42 rushing attempts, 7th in the NFL, 13 touchdowns, only behind Aaron Jones. So obviously he's the red zone guy for the Tennessee Titans. No surprise there. When it came to goal line touches, surprisingly, only tied for 13th in the NFL with 10. But out of players that had 10 or more, he punched in 7 of those, 70% conversion rate. Boom, right up there at the top of the NFL. So
Nice.
Again, it's pretty much just money in the bank. If Tennessee is down within the 5-yard line, you could just go ahead and chalk up 6 points for your fantasy team if you own Derrick Henry, or if Derrick Henry's on your team. So that is kind of, I feel like that goes right along with everything you just said, Ben. If you expect him to get the touchdowns, if you expect this team, like we saw once Ryan Tannehill took over, a team that would be on top of the scoreboard, could get Henry that, 15 or more touches. There's a certain number, I feel like, and you've done the studies before, Ben, where if he hits that number, he's going to produce in fantasy. But if he doesn't, it's probably going to be a dud game. But the bottom line is Tennessee needs to be on top of the scoreboard for that to happen. So if you believe in that and you think that can happen, then yeah, running back 7, still a little dicey. And I think I'm right there with you, Ben. I think we have like a 180 from last offseason.
Oh my God. Am I going to become the DH defender of this podcast this season? What are we talking about here? Okay, who's he going around? Josh Jacobs? Do you guys like Josh Jacobs more than DH this season?
No.
Okay.
I'm not taking him either at that
right.
price point.
Okay, Joe Mixon? No.
He's got passing upside and a terrible defense and a brand new improved quarterback in Joe Burrow.
Okay, but he's
got the
games
go
same...
south in Cincy.
Is he
has
any
an
more
opportunity
durable
to
than
be
DH?
involved from a PPR standpoint.
Do you think that they're going to have similar volume, they have similar health risk, it's similar everything?
I'm going to be a pros pro and not draft any of those fools at that point. I'm going to draft good.
Nice.
You know what? I have no problem with where DH is going in drafts. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, everybody expects the world from the guy, and maybe it'll happen. Here's one thing I do know. DH has won a rushing title. I know that. I know he can do it. He can finish on top of the world.
Sure.
And
Where did he finish last year, Jay? RB7. Where you got to pay this year? RB7. You're just paying for his ceiling is all. That's all I'm saying. He's got to get at least 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns just for you to break even.
Okay.
Just for you to break even.
Okay, fine. Zeke is RB2.
Okay,
and if Zeke is there, I'm going to take Zeke RB2, and I'm paying for his ceiling because I'm going to get
Zeke
elite
has all
back.
kinds of pass catching upside, you knucklehead.
Yeah, but dude, I'm going to be guaranteed 1,300 rushing yards. He's going to be the goal line back. I'm going to punch it in, and I'm going to get RB7 value. It's fine.
When me and Steve are on the same page about DH, you probably better listen, bro. That's all I'm going to say. Think about it. Me and Steve are on the same page.
I just feel I feel like everything went as well scripted for Derrick Henry as they could last season.
You're talking about his price tag, though. Give me the list of guys who should be in front of him.
I mean,
probably everyone that's going in front of him.
Everybody that's going in front of him.
Okay,
yes.
so then what's so egregious about his price tag?
Nothing. And I didn't say his price tag was egregious. I just said you're paying for his ceiling. At RB18, he's an immense value, and that's what I will argue about. At RB7, you're paying for his ceiling, so it depends on what you need. And I'm just saying, like, I don't want to be in a position, if you're at the 108 spot and you're in a position where you have to decide between Derrick Henry and, like, I don't know, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, like, I might go that direction. Wouldn't you, maybe? Maybe you would. Shut up.
Yeah, okay, possibly. but it's the same argument you can make for Josh Jacobs. He's going at his ceiling. Joe Mixon going at his ceiling. And nobody's
on in this podcast advocating for those dudes.
All right. All right. We'll move on. Let's hear what you guys have to say about our next guy. And that's David Johnson, who's the second running back from the AFC South, going off the board at RB18. Woo! Value. Listen, everybody. Let's go.
Oh, I'm coming for you and your boy DJ. You just buckle up.
He was being drafted with the 7th selection in the 3rd round behind Chris Carson, Le'Veon Bell, and in front of Todd Gurley and Leonard Fournette. Right now, I'm sorry, wow, I almost did it. The Texans have the 14th ranked strength of schedule for the running back position and the 19th ranked offensive line. Right now, DJ's aggregate projection is RB17, and Total Foresight likes him as RB23 compared to his RB18 price tag. Last season, he finished in as RB30 in points per game, played in 13 games, finished with 94 attempts for 345 yards and a paltry 3.7 yards per carry average and 2 touchdowns. He did add in 36 catches on 47 targets, though, for 370 yards and 4 touchdowns. Overall, he was RB33 last season. However, he was 12th in consistency, 11th in top 6 percentage, 11th in RB1 percentage, 10th in RB2 percentage, and really an underwhelming season for DJ. But he was also just 48th in consistency weeks 10 to 16th after Drake took over for him in the backfield. According to PlayerProfiler.com, his best comparable, LaDainian Tomlinson. It doesn't get any better than that. We'll take that. He was 10th in yards per touch, but he is also 12th in injury probability and 16th in fragility rating. He had a back strain and sprained ankle last year that derailed his season and rendered him pretty ineffective when he attempted to return from it. But if he's right, his early consistency percentages last year were very encouraging.
So, I guess I will go ahead and fill you guys in really quick on what Carlos Hyde did in the red zone, because it's probably going to be somewhat applicable to what we might see in Houston next season, because we all know that for whatever reason, Bill O'Brien, when he has very average running back talent, still really likes to come in 11th in the rate in which they run the football in the NFL. Don't get it, but that's what happened last season. So Carlos Hyde, he tied for 15th in the NFL with 32 red zone attempts, scored 5 touchdowns. There's nothing impressive, as we all know, about what Carlos Hyde did in the red zone for the Houston Texans. And that's kind of also what worries me a little bit about David Johnson is I think his pass catching days being a PPR running back are probably over at this point. And when you are the running back, the 1 and 2 down back for a Deshaun Watson offense, Watson, one of the things that makes him great, he is willing to extend plays. He's willing to pull it down and run the ball. You just don't see those guys get a lot of targets. So I don't know. I'm like completely all out on David Johnson this year. There's a lot of question marks there. And yeah, Ben, we'll go ahead. I'm just going to step back and.
Well, you guys are both dumb and you're both haters tonight. I can't wait to hear how David Johnson's ceiling's RB18 and how, Ben would draft everybody around him over DJ with the muck going around him. But let's go for it. Let's hear it, Ben.
That'd be a nice ceiling.
So his encouraging percentages as far as RB1 and RB2 percentages, things of that nature, early part of the season, that was largely supported by 41 total targets over that span. Okay. Duke Johnson rightfully claims the bulk of the passing volume out of Houston's backfield, ranking 15th in RB targets last season. And that was in addition to Carlos Hyde rushing for over 1,000 yards. So for me, we've got three things working against DJ this year. First, Duke is limiting his pass catching upside. Second, there are concerns about his health that are very legitimate. He did not look good coming back from that injury at all last year. Hopefully he's fully healthy and that changes heading into this offseason. But third is the Bill O'Brien effect. Thus, if we continue to get positive reports about Chris Carson's health, then I'm taking all the running backs in this group over DJ.
Just as I suspected, dumb. Let's move on.
I love it. I love it so much. Next, we're moving on to a guy that I think is kind of underrated heading into this season is Jacksonville Jaguars running back Leonard Fournette, currently going as RB20 at the 310 behind David Johnson. I'd take him over David Johnson and Todd Gurley in front of Jonathan Taylor and Melvin Gordon. He currently has the fourth ranked running back strength of schedule, but only has a 26th ranked O-line. The aggregate projection for him is RB16, better than his RB20 price tag, and Total Foresight likes him as RB7. Fantasy points per game last year, it was RB9, did not miss a game, had 265 rush attempts for over 1,150 yards, 4.3 yards a carry, and just 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 76 receptions on 100 targets for 522 yards and 0 receiving his RB20 price tag. He was still total despite only 3 total touchdowns. RB6 overall, 7th in consistency, 17th in consistency weeks 10 to 16, 14th in foresight consistency, 7th in top 6 percentage, 5th in RB1 percentage, 7th in RB2 percentage, 6th in rushing attempts, 6th in rush yards, 5th in longest run, 6th in runs greater than 20 yards, 4th in running back receptions, 2nd in running back targets, 4th in running back receiving yards. At Next Gen Stats, that was all while facing the 10th highest percentage of 8-man fronts. At playerprofiler.com, you saw he was 2nd in weighted opportunities, 8th in breakaway runs, 8th in yards created, but 19th in injury probability. There's been a lot of talk about Chris Thompson and Jay Gruden's reunion in Jacksonville and how that is projected to equate to much less running back pass volume for Fournette in 2020. So I took a look at it. If you cut his pass volume from last year in half, he still would have finished as RB16 overall. Compared to his price tag, that's still a pretty nice value. So at RB20, I think Fournette is, like I said, he's a very nice value since he was RB6 overall last year with just 3 touchdowns. I do not think, even if they're bad, I don't think there's any way that man can rush and receive for as many yards as he did without getting more than 3 total touchdowns. So I like, again, what he's done. He's less fragile and less injury prone than your guy, David Johnson. And he's done more recently.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about Leonard Fournette and his inefficiency in the passing game. It's that's why they brought in Chris Thompson. But as we all know, I cannot tell you off the top of my head when Chris Thompson's last played 75% of a season. So,
and when was he healthy for 3 straight games last time?
And that's what I mean. So there's a major question mark there. It's almost he might slow down Fournette a little bit. It's, it's various parts of the season, maybe in the beginning of the season, but I wouldn't let that be something that totally negates you from wanting to believe in and draft Leonard Fournette in PPR formats. But yeah, guys, we're through this is our 7th division now out of 8. And I've looked at a lot of red zone statistics, and his numbers obviously stick out like a sore thumb because you're looking at a guy who tied for 5th in the NFL with 43 red zone attempts, but 3 touchdowns. Like, I think I had that many touchdowns as a 7th grade running back in middle school. So, yeah, it was that bad. So, and then he also was 3rd on the team in red zone targets, guys. Like, he had 9 red zone targets, ranked 3rd for the Jaguars. Didn't score on any of those either, as evidenced by what, Ben said when he didn't get in didn't get in the end zone at all off of a single reception. So, and, I thought it was funny, guys. I went ahead and looked because I was like, my goodness, he got 100 targets on the entirety of the season.
And no touchdowns.
Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler both had over 100. And both those guys almost hit 1,000 yards receiving, and they both got in the end zone at least 4 times. So, you like to think that there's no way it could be any worse as far as his efficiency next year. And we already talked about it. We talked about Minshew. We think this is going to be an offense that has to throw the ball a lot. So in PPR formats, if Fournette can be healthy, there's no reason why he cannot, even like you said, Ben, if you cut that productivity in half, RB16, he should still be able to flirt with RB1 numbers, be at least a low-end RB1. So especially with the touchdown swinging the other way.
His touchdowns could double, and he would still only have 6.
You guys don't know. I'm so bored about hearing you gushing over
with sharing
Leonard
facts
Fournette.
and valuable analysis.
Listen, the fact that you called Leonard Fournette more durable than David Johnson is laughable.
PlayerProfiler.com quantifies this with metrics, and I was just pointing out that he had a better probability injury.
Yeah, okay. The thing that's going to be held against him, though, is a dislocated wrist. We're not talking, ligament, muscle.
That was a couple injury. That was a couple season-ending injuries ago, bro. Last year was the ankle in the back.
I've got his injury history right in front of me, too. I can read off both of them. And you want to talk about Leonard Fournette? We can go every single season. Ankle,
Leonard Fournette didn't miss a game
tissue.
last year, bro. And David Johnson looked like trash when he tried to come back from his injuries. That's all I'm saying.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'd say Leonard Fournette's pretty due based on his career. So I'm just not somebody who's going to bank on him on completing another 16-game season.
That's fair. That's okay.
All right, moving on to Jonathan Taylor. Fun episode tonight. All right, of the Indianapolis Colts. The rookie is going as RB21 behind Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, in front of Melvin Gordon and David Montgomery. A bunch of ouchie running backs. Right now, the Colts have the best running back strength of schedule in the league and the best offensive line, as we had mentioned. Jonathan Taylor's aggregate projection is RB28, and his total foresight rank is RB24 overall. As a 3-year starter at Wisconsin and Dayton Brugler's rookie RB3, in 2017, he had 299 rush attempts for just under 2,000 yards for a 6.6 yard per carry average and 13 touchdowns. He also added 8 receptions for 95 yards. He was second-team All-American, first-team All-Big Ten, Big Ten Freshman of the Year. In 2018, in 13 games, he had 307 carries for 2,194 yards and a 7.1 yard per carry average, all improving on his freshman year. He also increased his touchdowns to 16 on the ground and 8 catches for 60 yards and was once again a unanimous All-American, first-team All-Big Ten, Big Ten Running Back of the Year. So let's go to last season. In 2019, in 14 games, 320 yards, 2,000 yards rushing, 6.3 yard per carry average. Stop me if you've heard this before. 21 touchdowns on the ground, 26 receptions for 252 yards, and 5 touchdowns through the air. And again, unanimous All-American, first-team All-Big Ten, Big Ten Running Back of the Year. For his career, he had almost 1,000 carries, 926 carries for 6,174 yards, 6.7 yards per carry, 50 touchdowns, 42 catches for 400 yards, and 5 touchdowns through the air, but 18 career fumbles, including 6 in 2019. That's the only mark against the guy in college, let's be honest. According to PlayerProfiler.com, his best comparable is another Big Ten stud, Ezekiel Elliott. Per Dane Brugler in his 2020 draft guide, his weaknesses are known, but few. He needs to shore up his fumbling issues and is a work in progress as a pass catcher. However, the good far outweighs the bad. Runs, here's some quotes. Runs with outstanding balance and forward lean, skilled vision and patience at the line of scrimmage, gravitates towards developing holes, flexible body type, sticking his foot in the ground, dropping his hips, and changing course, never gives up at contact and crawls for extra yards, runs through arm tackles, spinning off defenders, outstanding perimeter and second level speed to force poor angles, shows a home run gear in the open field. I mean, what is there not to like about that? 10 plays of 35 plus yards in 2019. The Colts coaching staff has already left the door open to riding the hot hand, and it feels like merely a matter of time before he takes over that backfield.
So, guys, when I think what makes Jonathan Taylor like an attractive person to possibly draft this year in fantasy is when you look at the Colts overall, like we kind of alluded to it a little bit when we talked about Phillip Rivers. This is a team that ran the ball fifth most often. They ran the ball fifth most rushing attempts, period, 471 times, fellas. And speaking about red zone activity, I mean, they ran the ball 72 times in the red zone. Marlon Mack only had 32 of those. And I think a lot of the reason that they brought in Jonathan Taylor is because they couldn't rely on Marlon Mack to be the guy week in and week out, especially down there in that part of the field, because we saw last season guys get significant run in the red zone. I'm talking about Jordan Wilkins, Jonathan Williams, even Jacoby Brissett. So now you enter Jonathan Taylor. Got a lot of J names. We'd appreciate that, Jay.
Absolutely.
But in this Colts backfield. And so when you think about Jonathan Taylor, it's like even without the PPR upside, because we know they have Nyheim Hines there, even if 250 carries is not outlandish for Marlon Mack to get plenty of play, for Nyheim Hines to chip in, for whoever else they give some carries to here and there. Maybe even Phillip Rivers himself. Who knows? Maybe he'll take off a little bit. But point being, behind that offensive line, 250 carries could be over 1,000 yards, and he could flirt with double-digit touchdowns. So I think that obviously that's like a best-case scenario where maybe he could creep up to that like low-end RB1, high-end RB2. But I feel like at RB20, 21, you're probably going to get him closer to his floor anyways, just based on being in that offense with that kind of rushing ball.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. As we're about to discuss, Marlon Mack was an effective rusher and almost a non-existent pass catcher. And, I kind of feel like that's been Jonathan Taylor's MO. The highest amount of catches he had in a single season was 26. And with glowing reports about Nyheim Hines all summer long, that same RB22 overall type of season Marlon Mack had last year could be how Jonathan Taylor's 2020 shakes out if he's equally uninvolved in the passing game or doesn't get into the end zone 10 plus times. But I will say, with that strength of schedule and that offensive line, coupled with defenses having to respect the viability of Phillip Rivers, I certainly can see his top 20 upside this season. But for me, though, it all comes down to how you've constructed your roster to that point in your draft. What do you need there? If you're in a position to kind of take a shot on an upside rookie running back, go for it. But, it all depends on how your draft's gone thus far, whether or not I'd advise you to go that direction or not in 2020. Yeah. Anything else to add on Jonathan Taylor, Jay? You still mad? So. Okay.
Oh, no, I'm just looking up injury histories. I want to read you injury histories and prove you wrong.
Okay, that's fine. Next up, we've got another Indianapolis Colts running back, Marlon Mack. He's currently going as RB33 at the 703 behind J.K. Dobbins and James White and in front of Jordan Howard and Antonio Gibson. Sorry, Marlon Mack. You are the odd man out of that group for me, bro. But again, just like Jonathan Taylor, best running back strength of schedule, best O-line. The aggregate projection for Marlon Mack this year is RB35. Total Foresight's right in line, RB34. The ADP, RB33. Projection, RB35. Total Foresight, RB34. Last year in fantasy points per game in that offense as the guy, he was only RB24. He did miss 2 games, got over 1,000 yards off of 232 attempts, 4.4 yards per carry, and 6 rushing touchdowns. Like I said, not involved in the passing game at all. I make a lot of jokes about DA type passing volume. This guy got less passing volume than than DH, Derrick Henry. And he only had 14 receptions on 16 targets for 82 yards and 0 touchdowns. RB22 overall, 33rd in consistency. 27th in consistency weeks 10 to 16. This is all without Jonathan Taylor, by the way. 31st in foresight consistency, 30th in top 6 percentage, 33rd in RB1 percentage, 32nd in RB2 percentage, despite being 11th in rushing attempts, 11th in rush yards, 2nd in runs greater than 20 yards, and being 14th in touchdowns. At playerprofiler.com, he was 3rd in breakaway runs, 12th in breakaway run rate, 15th in evaded tackles, 11th in juke rate, and 18th in dominator rating. He was also 10th in both yards created and yards created per touch, but 17th in fragility rating. Marlon Mack is listed as the week 1 starter, but man, does it feel like he is a dead man walking, which is reflected in his price tag and his projection and his total foresight ranking. And honestly, Mack has had his moments, but with that O-line, he was only able to convert being 11th in attempts to RB22 overall. He has 0 pass catching upside, and the newer, shinier, bigger, better, and badder version of him was drafted in the top of the 2nd round this year. So for me, he's irrelevant in 2020 unless JT gets hurt.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I mean, I think I said my piece when talking about Jonathan Taylor. And, I think Mac, he'll get 8 to 12 carries a week. He'll end up probably around 150, 160 carries on the season. He'll be just fine. But he's not someone you're going to want to start in fantasy football unless there's clear-cut news that he's the only guy who's going to get, a majority of the work on a given week.
And
like,
even
plain
then,
and simple.
it's if he can stay on the field at that point.
Yep.
So I think you guys nailed it. All right, moving on to Duke Johnson. This one should be fun. All right, Houston Texans running back Duke Johnson, who is currently being drafted as RB 54 in the
best running back on the team, man.
Leonard Fournette's had one season where he hasn't missed time. One in his career, pro and college. Just saying. Can't say that about DJ. All right.
Oh, great.
Boston, he's going behind Boston Scott and Bryce Love and in front of Justin Jackson and DeAndre Washington. Right now, as we had mentioned before, the Texans have the 14th ranked running back strength of schedule and the 19th ranked offensive line. Duke Johnson's projection's actually much better than his price tag. His aggregate projection is RB 36. His foresight projection, RB 39. Last season in points per game, he finished in as RB 43. Again, much better than his RB 54 price tag. He did not miss a game, had 79 rushing attempts for right around 400 yards and 1 score on the ground, added 39 catches on 56 targets for 365 yards through the air and 3 scores through the air. He was RB 37 overall, again, price tag of RB 54. He was between just 36th and 42nd in all consistency metrics, 15th in yards per catch, 19th in running back receptions, 15th in running back targets, 16th in running back receiving yards, and he was tied for 8th in running back receiving touchdowns. According to playerprofiler.com, he was 9th in true yards per carry, 2nd in yards per touch, 4th in breakaway run rate. This is just getting me more frustrated about all the years of Duke Johnson not getting the ball enough. Feed the man. Yep. 21st in juke rate, 15th in production premium. Can we just please free Duke Johnson? Give the man some volume. He's tough, durable, 2nd in yards per touch, 4th in breakaway run rate. If anything happens to DJ, look out for Duke Johnson. But for now, in 2020, his most relevant impact on fantasy is that he limits the pass-catching upside of David Johnson, who enjoyed his early season success partially because he saw 41 targets in weeks 1 through 6. God, Ben, you're such... Can I curse on this?
Oh, man, I love it. So...
I just know I'm going to text you every week DJ has a touchdown or does anything good.
I really enjoy when you have fantasy success, so I hope that happens. I do.
We
won't talk about your other running backs.
Listen, bud, if everything was so easy to predict, then we'd all win championships every year, wouldn't we?
Sure thing.
So I'll just say my quick piece on Duke Johnson. Always liked Duke Johnson. Thought for years, like you guys, he should get a shot.
Best DJ on the team, baby.
And I have a feeling we'll probably, unless they bring in somebody off the street, do something to address that position. More than likely, Duke will get to have his shot at some point this season. And it'll be interesting to see if he can capitalize, because he's been in the league for years. We've had enough professional coaches and scouts that have not thought him worthy of carrying a workload, and that might be for a reason. I'm curious to find out. I think that we'll get to, so this will be fun.
To be fair to poor Duke, that's been a bunch of terrible Browns regimes and Bill O'Brien.
Well, but every team that didn't draft him in the NFL draft
also fair, or sign him.
But yeah, it'll be interesting because every time we see him on the field with the ball in his hands, he seems like a very capable professional running back that never seems to get like a fair shake at being the guy. So it'll be interesting because probably by week 3. Sorry, Jay. Well, I'm just kidding. If I knew that, I would have drafted Duke Johnson probably in like the 7th round or something. Yeah. But we're just trolling Jay tonight. Sorry, man.
Clearly, the masses are on your side, Jay. If more people were really concerned about DJ, Duke Johnson would not be going as RB54 as the only other running back in that.
Just sleep with one eye open tonight.
Okay, good job on DJ. The last running back to round out this episode, Indianapolis Colts running back number 3 tonight on this podcast, Nyheim Hines. He is currently going as RB57 at the 1308 behind Justin Jackson and behind DeAndre Washington and in front of LaShawn McCoy and Benny Snell Jr. One of the best names in fantasy football all around, but just not very relevant. Anyways, like his teammates, he has the best running back strength of schedule and the best offensive line, but he's only projected to be RB44, and Total Foresight likes him to be RB49. However, that's better than both of his. Both of those metrics are better than his RB57 price tag, and he was also RB54 in fantasy points per game as a rookie last season. Didn't miss a game. Only 3.7 yards per carry, just like David Johnson. 45 attempts and 165 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Also added 41 catches on 53 targets for 298 yards and no touchdowns through the air. He was RB43 overall, 33rd in consistency weeks 10 through 16, but between just 36th and 48th in all other consistency metrics. However, he was 17th in running back receptions, 18th in running back targets, and 19th in running back receiving yards. And at playerprofiler.com, you could see he was also 13th in yards per touch. That's despite that 3.7 yards per carry average. Got a sleeper alert 3 days ago that read, quote, one of the most active players in the Colts offense throughout training camp has been Nyheim Hines. He's everywhere. Could be a big year for him, end quote. There's been a lot of buzz about him all offseason, but it'd take an expected shootout for me to ever consider putting him in a flex spot for even 1 week throughout the year, unless he really starts popping in the first couple weeks or something crazy like that.
Thank you for saying that, Ben, because I have heard too much about, Phillip Rivers and Austin Eckler. I'm sorry, Nyheim Hines is not Austin Eckler. Yes. And also in this offense, we talked about it already. The Indianapolis Colts are going to run the ball so much more than the Chargers have in the past. And the volume just won't necessarily be there for Nyheim Hines to matter on a week-to-week basis, unless, like you said, we can call like a shootout where we can kind of predict Nyheim Hines to get enough PPR action for him to be worth starting even in a flex spot. I mean, you think about it, there's T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell, Jack Doyle. He'd be 5th in line for targets in any given week. So, yeah, I mean, I get it, kind of like a perfectly fine bench stash kind of a guy. But, yeah, count me out. I will not start him most of the season unless I really have to.
MVP, Jay?
I mean, look, he's a free agent in our league, and I'm not scurrying to pick him up. My bench is too full.
Yeah. Well said. I mean, hey, that's probably our fastest 3-man episode of this preview season.
Yeah,
no,
it
yeah,
is.
71 minutes right now. We flew through
How
that
about
division.
that?
Anybody got anything else before we get out of here?
I don't think so. What do we have up next?
All right. Well, it depends. Is RVJ traveling this weekend? Are we going to be recording on Saturday morning?
Saturday morning it is.
All right. Then we will be back with everyone Saturday morning to cover the wide receivers and the tight ends that Gardner Minshew throws to in the AFC South. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesite.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.
And then halfway through the episode, it dawns on me, James also probably pretty ticked off because of David Montgomery's situation today. So, sorry, Jay. It's all right. You've got your RB2 as your quarterback position. Don't worry about it. Yeah, CMC is the only one in that category for me. That's my franchise for the next 4 years.
Well, as I've proven last season, I'll trade anybody.
Yeah.
For better.
I mean, I say that
worse.
he's untouchable, but he'll be gone by week 3. Watch.